Hi, good evening. My name is Jay Rothman. I am the host of the show. Welcome to Real Men, Real Talk Live. Welcome back this evening. Again, my name is Jay. I'm the host of the show. Welcome, Evis Love Heath, the man of the land from down under. He calls Australia home. Welcome back, Evis.
As always, brothers and sisters, thank you, thank you, thank you.
And we have Mr. Josh Richer. He calls Southern California home. Welcome back, Josh Richer.
Great to be here with you guys. Ready for another fun night.
And of course, we have Mr. Jeff Fasano. Nashville, Tennessee is where he resides today. Welcome back, Jeff Fasano.
Thank you, Jay Rothman. I'm so happy to be here.
So tonight is episode number 101. 101. Last week, we had quite the show celebrating our 100th episode. We had a special guest, Rachel Fiore, who joined us in our topic last week, which was, of course, weak people don't heal, warriors do. We had such a beautiful time with her. We felt that the flow was so spot on that we are talking about in the future having Rachel join us, perhaps maybe once a quarter, to kind of share some of the feminine divine in Real Men Real Talk Live. So we'll see what happens, what develops over the long run. But in the meantime, tonight's episode 101 is all about the richness of forgiveness. Is forgiveness an act or is it an attitude? And there's so much more in depth. The last time we did a topic around forgiveness was episode number 37. So we felt perhaps it was time to revisit with this topic because this one is simple, not easy to embrace in our own lives. And so, Evis Love, since you're on the top shelf with me in this moment, and you did a beautiful short live today, coming in from the Outback, I'd like to invite you to kick us off, warm us up. But before you do that, I want to take a moment here to welcome our viewers and listeners. If you're joining us live streaming, coming in from LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook, you showed up right on time. If you should hear something that you like or love, please tap your love button on your monitor so that we could be lit up this evening. And if you should have any comments or questions for us, please feel free to drop them down into your comment feed, and we'll do our best to acknowledge as many as we can. And to those of you that are joining us again tonight, welcome back to episode 101. So, Evis, what does that mean to you? What does the richness of forgiveness mean? And let's start to break this topic down tonight.
Yeah, let's dive in, brothers. And brothers and sisters there on the other side of the pond here in the land down under. Thanks, as always, from the bottom of my heart for joining us on the live tonight. And please share it out into the community. We're 101 shows deep into Real Men Real Talk Live. And as I said on the live this morning, some of these messages, even though we did a little bit of a deep dive on this in show 37, I think Jay's just mentioned, some of these messages can't be repeated enough until we really start to learn something like this beautiful power of forgiveness. Now, here today in the land down under, one day ahead in the future, we're actually celebrating the Good Friday, which many people around the world worship. And whatever belief system, whatever particular belief system that you're following within your journey, one of those beautiful values I find with all of these traditions is really the art of forgiveness. Now, one of the questions we did ask there, is it an act? It is a practice. Is it an attitude? Or is it, like I said, one of those values that we could all really harness within our own lives to fulfill a journey of happiness, a bit of peace and contentment within our lives? Because I even think about my own personal journey, with this art of forgiveness within my life. And I've been on the receiving end. I've been on both sides of this fence when I think of forgiveness, I just have a look at that word, my brothers and sisters, and as always, what are we forgiving? What is this practice of forgiving? We're forgiving an energy. And until we forgive this particular energy within our lives, what unfortunately this does to us is it allows us to be very stagnant. It does not allow us to really let go of some of these hardships, maybe some of these events or circumstances that involve particular people, places within our lives that we become attached to. So what happens? We can very easily fantasize particular events that may not even happen a particular way. We get flooded with particular emotions that don't allow us to live our best possible version. So the people that I'm helping on their journey, I really do encourage them to go on one of these particular steps of forgiveness. And what it really does for me is it really brings back their emotional power. It allows them to experience less depression within their life. It allows them to experience less anxiety within their life. And some of those things I know in my life that I've taken up where I go into a little bit more heavier sort of behaviors that may not have served me or the particular circumstance or the people that were involved with this art of forgiveness that we're talking about. So look, I'm going to be diving in deep tonight about this because it is a very personal thing, but it also is some of those particular things within our life. Like I said, if we harness it, it can become a very beautiful practice that allows us to really fulfill some of those goals and intentions in our lives that we want to see out in the reality.
Beautiful. Love it. And
Jay, go ahead, Josh.
Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to say that was a mouthful.
Yeah,
that was a lot. When you were talking, and I'm listening to you, and we did a show on this, and we've talked about it a lot, and a lot of people do talk about forgiveness. What is the definition of that? That just popped into my head when you were. I was like, what is the definition of forgiveness? What is that? What does that mean? And it might mean something different to the four of us and to everybody watching the show right now. What is the definition of forgiveness? Is it an act or is it an attitude? Is it placed with compassion on ourselves and compassion and empathy for others based upon whatever happened, based upon whatever someone may have said to us, based upon what we may have said to someone else? It's based upon where we are in our process living our life, wherever that may be. We might be at a place in our life where somebody comes to us and said, you said something to me, and then a whole bunch of years later, you go, wow, I may have done that, but you know what? I'm not that person anymore. I don't even know what that is. I'm far along in my process, especially us thinking about something that someone said to us or did to us or said something to us a whole bunch of years ago. Where are we in this process? So what is forgiveness really? Is forgiveness accepting where someone is in their process in life and going, oh, wow, that's where they were. That's where they are in their process. Maybe they didn't know what they said. What is forgiveness? Is it acceptance? Is it compassion? Is it empathy? Is it something that we use as a tactic to let ourselves off the hook, perhaps? And that's my question. My question is, like I said, it just came up. What is forgiveness? What's the definition of that? And I'm still trying to figure that out, because what I've come to realize that it is one of my most challenging things. I could think of people and of what they said to me or did to me years ago, or did things or said things, I'm not sure. And I've held on to it. And what I'm learning is how to not to hold on to that anymore. But do I need to go to someone who may have said something 10 years ago and it still sticks with me, and say, I forgive you. Is that a tactic that I need to do when they might not even remember what happened and they've never even asked for forgiveness? Or is it something that we come to within ourselves to resolve whatever we need to resolve with that person, so we can then move on with our lives and not hold them hostage or ourselves hostage any longer?
Love that, Jeff. I want to bring up Katrina May. I think she framed it out really nice in this moment. Katrina May, coming in from British Columbia, the west coast of Canada, our sister nation. Welcome back, Katrina May. She says, for me, it was the beginning of my soul's journey. I believe it is an act. To me, I feel forgiveness is like signing a check and buying my freedom. Josh, I'm going to invite you to break that down, especially the last part of that. What does that mean to you? What do you think she means by that? I feel forgiveness is like signing a check and buying my freedom. Freedom from what, Josh Richard?
Well, freedom from carrying all that mental baggage, you know? It's like we lost Jeff.
No, we didn't lose him. He just put himself in a timeout for some odd reason.
Yeah, if for me, it's freedom from that, carrying those thoughts. I personally, I can think of, I went on a trip with a woman to Bali several years ago. I think that was late 2017. And we ended up getting together on that trip, and then we got back home and things got busy and didn't talk as much. And I felt very guilty about that. And I carried that for years. I think in 2020, I finally messaged her and said, look, I'm sorry. I didn't have the clarity in the moment to explain. And I didn't, I was on my personal journey at the time and wasn't able to articulate and maybe even express myself, my feelings, my desires, and as well as I could have. And I carried that for 3 years before I reached out to her and said, I'm sorry. And she wrote back and was like, look, don't even worry about it. It was what it was, and it was not a big deal. And so I carried that weight for 3 years, and it was in the back of my mind every, few months or every month. And so I felt incredibly free after having that conversation with her. And so I see that writing of the check and buying our freedom is that it's freedom from us holding on to things that we've done to other people and feeling guilty about it. And then the flip side of that is holding on to bad feelings towards someone else. And I guess my question in tonight's discussion is, do we need to clear the air like I did? I felt the need to, and I did that with other people in my life. And around that same time as when I was kind of working through forgiveness, and they all said similar things. It was sort of like, hey man, don't worry. I think you're making a bigger deal out of it than it was in the moment. And so therefore we're good. And so they clearly didn't hold on to it, but I did. And yeah, that was writing those checks for my freedom, was reaching out to them and saying sorry and being brutally honest about that. I didn't have the capacity back then to voice this, it just, I was at a different point in my journey. I didn't have the strength to voice what I needed or my boundaries or anything of that nature. And so.
Yeah, I love that, Josh. I want to take a moment here from my perspective, just kind of break this down a little bit. When we are hurt by someone else's behavior, when we are on the receiving end of pain or hurt, sometimes it feels like an injustice. Sometimes it feels it's just a deep, deep heartbreak. Which part of ourself is in that moment suffering? Which part of ourself feels some type of pain We can describe it as many different emotions that may ripple through in that moment. But from my experience in my own life, I think most of the time when I am hurt by what someone has said or how someone has treated me, it's a part of me that's my younger self. It's that little inner boy within, coming back to that again. Yes, Bob Phillips, that in that moment, I'm butthurt. And if I hold on to that, sometimes we hold on to that hurt. That person may not even be in our life anymore, either because they have chosen to detach or we have chosen to detach. And it can even go as far as we're holding on to hurt from a loved one that's not even with us. They have transitioned. They're not even alive. Yet we are still, as Evis, you said so eloquently in the Outback this morning in the wilderness, is that in that moment, we are still entangled in that exchange with that individual. And so, as Tiffany said, coming in from Wisconsin just a few moments ago, she said, a wise person once told me, forgiveness is the apology you may never receive. And what that means to me, thank you, Tiffany, and welcome back to Real Men Real Talk Live, coming in from your home of Wisconsin. I want to say that for me, it's about the apology isn't for the other person. The apology is for us. Because what I know is as long as I am holding on to some type of energetic exchange that came forward from some type of relationship that we had, I'm still in it with them. And that is a heavy burden. And what I want to experience is as much freedom within my life as I can. And I'm not talking about the freedom because of the country we live in. It doesn't matter what country we reside in. What matters is the land within our freedom within ourselves. And so for me, when I'm able to recognize two things, one is how old am I feeling in that moment? And I'm holding on to a resentment or anger or pain or trauma around some type of pain that I've received in that relationship. When I'm able to acknowledge that it's my younger self that's holding on to it, I have an opportunity in that moment to parent myself and really, really go in deep and ask me, is this good for me? And the longer I hold on to it, it's not going to just go away. And you can't pray this away either. You cannot pray this away. It's us taking the act or action. And for me, one of the gateways, so I'm going to drop a liquid pure moment here, a tool to forgiveness of others, is when we're able to see them not in the act or as a perpetrator, as it's described in a spiritual community, but more so as having empathy for that person and seeing them truly as a wounded soul, and understand that if they love themselves, if they were at peace with who they were and are, they would be less likely to consciously want to hurt somebody else. Why? Because hurt people hurt people. And so when I'm able to see whoever that is, whether it be an employer, a boss, a customer, a friend, a relative, a stranger in a moment, and I'm able to stop myself and not give my power away to that moment with them and just see them for who they are and the pain that they're in, and they're showing up that way because they don't know any other way to show up. One of the 4 agreements is don't take things personally, right? So I've shared a whole lot there. I want to invite you to piggyback. Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay. So what you said, Jay, is amazing. It's mindful, and it is a wonderful way. And I agree with you. My question is now, if we're coming from that place of exactly what you just said, which is incredibly mindful, conscious, aware, and all of that, should we expect that from others?
Should we expect what from others?
Exactly what should we expect if we're coming from that place of what you just described, which is what we all want to, and I think most of us here are conscious in that awareness stage, in that consciousness. If we say something, are reminded of something that we said a whole bunch of years ago, and somebody comes to us and says something, should we expect those people to look at it from the point of view of what you described?
I'd say absolutely not. And absolutely not, because expectations are a precursor for a new resentment.
Yep.
I'm going to repeat that.
100%.
Expectations are resentment. Expectations are a precursor for new resentment. And what I
Right.
mean by that is that just because I am where I'm at in my soul journey, and for the first time in my life as a 60-year-old man, I don't want to hold on to anger towards other people, even when I am hurt at my soul level, at my heart space, because that is not serving me. Now, how they choose to show up, I have no control over other people. And as soon as I put an expectation, well, if I'm able to do it, why are you not able to? That's like, now we're going to keep score. And I ripped up that scorecard. I don't want to keep score anymore of anybody. I'm a full-time project here. I'm a full-time job. My full-time job is learning how to take care of myself, how to honor myself, how to respect myself, how to see myself and understand myself and love myself. But the answer is no. Anyone disagree with me? Forever hold your peace. Now is it? And we can agree to disagree. That's what Real Men Real Talk is about. We actually went through that yesterday in our production meeting. We actually walked through a pretty let's say pretty interesting moment, but we navigated through it.
Mhm.
Yep. And that's why I asked the question, and you gave the answer that I was expecting.
Okay, so that was
Mhm.
you had a setup question there. That one wasn't that Fasano.
Mhm.
Well, no, not it wasn't real. It wasn't a setup question,
Yeah, I get
because
it.
the question popped into my head. Wow, you know what? If we and anybody that's watching the show, coming from the place of mindfulness that Jay just described, which is where we want to come from, and we are in that. So basically, and then are we to expect that from others? And that question came to me, and Jay just answered it perfectly, because we're forming relationships based upon where we resonate and vibrate. And no, I agree with you, Jay. It's like, but then comes, okay, wow, all right, because it's so important to keep in mind that we want to live in a mindful way, the most mindful way that we can, on a conscious level of awareness, and accepting people where we are. I wouldn't say we're holding ourselves to a higher standard, but in some way, shape, or form, we want to live our lives in a very mindful, conscious way. And that's where we are. And we could look at situations like this, like Jay just said. Well, when that happened, and that person said that to me, can I look at that where they are, which is really an attitude, not an act, not a tactic. It's about the attitude that I have, that I could say, oh, wow, you know what? That person said that, and I don't have to repeat it. Jay said it perfectly. And
I
we're
want to
coming from
go
that
ahead.
conscious place, then that's where we are. So then we can have that attitude. What Jay is talking about is an attitude of I am, and to me, that is what I'm learning through reading this wonderful book. And what Jay just said, that's what forgiveness is. It's not an act or a tactic that we have to go back to somebody and stay. And I'm going to let Ev go, but I do have a wonderful story about this that just popped into my mind that I'll share in a bit.
I want to switch gears here real quick. Ev, I want to invite you to kind of help us here understand, what do you need to do to forgive yourself? What would it look like when, because we can all acknowledge, at least right here, right now, we've all hurt other people. We've all made choices in our life that have hurt people really, really deep. I mean, deep, deep hurt, deep, deep pain. What are some of the tools that we can embrace? Some of the shortcuts, if there is such a thing. How do we forgive ourselves? What can that process look like, Ev?
Beautiful, brothers. Beautiful. And look, what we're talking about here again, brothers and sisters, is this beautiful emotional intelligence. It's all emotions. So, you know, a lot of these stuff behind some of these practices of forgiveness that we ask for, very flooded by, as we can see, anger. And when we're under the influence of anger as a negative emotion, like I mentioned at the intro, a lot of these particular events that we may be asking forgiveness or having to forgive someone, they're actually flooded by particular emotions that don't keep us in they keep us in a stagnant in a place where we can't move forward. So one of those things for me, you know, like we've got to really look at both sides of the spectrum here. How can we forgive someone else once we're able to forgive that person? And look, it may not actually be physically telling that particular person. It may be done ritually within your own well-being. It may be done in ceremony. It may be done through your meditation or visualization. But the most beautiful gift out of all of this forgiving, because it's a beautiful gift, is the art of being able to forgive yourself. And how does that look, and why is it so important? Because you were a part of the entanglement. You were a part of the attachment or the connection within the event with this particular person or this interpersonal relationship. So we've got to go back to, like Jay's talking about there, we've got to go back to some of these beautiful, more compassionate emotions. We've actually got to show gratitude for the experience. You must be crazy of showing gratitude for something like this. But no, gratitude, as we know, is another gateway, which can then allow us to learn the lesson, get the gift from the particular event, and be able to move forward. So this is also going to be able to build up our self-esteem within our own empowerment, brothers and sisters.
Yeah, I love that.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
I love that. Real quick, I want to acknowledge Jeremy Marion coming in from LinkedIn, live streaming on LinkedIn. He says, I believe forgiveness is a process that allows an individual to find peace within, which in turn creates a new perspective without negative feelings, allowing both parties to grow and heal. What do you make of that,
Boom.
Josh?
Yep, that's great.
Yeah.
Welcome. By the way,
Yeah.
Jeremy, welcome to Real Men Real Talk Live tonight.
It is. It's that piece that we give ourselves.
Yeah.
Ev, you nailed it too, and you brought up some great points there that reminded me of how powerful forgiveness. How powerful gratitude is, and being able to wrap gratitude around a lesson is a beautiful way to move. I had a huge, heavy with my startup years ago. The start of my financial crash was this company we hired to program our software, and it was a Ponzi scheme. And the owner of this company I had met at a bar, and he roped me in, and I had a face to all of my financial pain and my downfall. And to the point where 5 years later, I still couldn't finance a car without having my sister co-sign for me, of which they gave me a rate of 24% on a car that my sister had to co-sign. Like, this is 5 years after the fact. So I was bitter. I was angry. I carried that for a long time. And I had one face to direct all that anger to. And it wasn't until I was able to look at that situation and wrap gratitude around. Now, you talk about that, Ev, and I'll explain how I did it in this moment, because it was really hard for me to get to that place. But I wouldn't have had my crash. I wouldn't have ended up at rehab. I wouldn't have ended up studying the brain. I wouldn't have ended up learning that I'm passionate about the human experience and deconstructing the human experience and helping others. I learned that I was actually a teacher in this life, and that was my purpose. So all of the previous awfulness had to happen to lead me to realizing my purpose, which was the most amazing gift I could have ever been given in this life. And so to be able to thank that man for that downfall is amazing. And to see the gift and to fully embrace the gift and be so grateful for it all that I would do it all again the same way and go through all of that pain again, because my journey from that point on has been incredible. But find the nugget, find the gift, and be grateful for that. And that's your start to healing. That's your start to shedding that weight and letting go of that anger and that bitterness and any of that you're carrying, because you don't want to carry this stuff. It's going to make you sick. It's going to give you disease. It's going to make you an awful, bitter person. You're not going to trust anybody. That's not a way to live.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that. This is one of those topics that, we have actually slipped down into the rabbit hole. And I want to share from my own personal experience of forgiveness of self. Part of the process for me has been around acknowledging I didn't know what I didn't know. And what I mean by that is that so many of the choices that I made that hurt myself and hurt others was because I was not connected at my soul or heart space. I was living in my ego, my egoic mind, as a very successful adult. Yet I was suffering inside. When I say successful, I'm not talking about success in my relationships. My relationships were not healthy. Most of them were compromised, fractured, and as some may say, broke. And for me, the awakening, if I may refer to it as that, was when I began to understand that I didn't have any consciousness around how I was showing up and how I was treating others, because I had no idea. I really didn't understand to the depth of how abusive I was for myself with my own self. And so the process of self-forgiveness for me truly was acknowledging that I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know how much of my own wounds I was carrying day in and day out, year after year, decade after decade. And it showed up in very, very harmful ways. Now, what that means to me is that I choose not to live in guilt and shame around my past choices and behaviors that impacted my own health, my own life, and my relationships. Because guilt and shame will never serve any of us as human beings. It just keeps us in self-deprecating, self-sabotaging energy and choices for ourselves. So what that means for me is that clearly it's accepting the fact that I didn't know that most of my choices and how I showed up was coming from my mind, my egoic mind, and I wasn't in touch with and living coming from my heart or soul space. And today, that's a choice that I know I have every moment of the day, that I'm gifted one more day to breathe and be alive in this lifetime. I always have a choice to show up coming from my egoic mind or coming from my heart. And I choose to live in my heart space today, because that's where love is. When I'm in my egoic space, I'm either defending or I'm offending. That's it. There's not a whole lot in between there. And I choose not to live that way anymore, because I don't want to hurt myself anymore, and I don't want to hurt people I care about. And so that's how I break that down. For me, it's accepting that I made these choices, and it's about not just asking someone to forgive you, because most people don't even know how to do that in a healthy way. We're taught in our homes, and I've said this before in prior episodes, you may recall, when someone asks you to forgive them, our first reaction, many of us, is to just say, okay, I forgive you. Because that's what we were taught as children. When our sibling hurt you or hurt me, and my mom or dad told my sister, apologize to your brother, and she would apologize to me because that's what she was told to do, or else she'd get punished. It wasn't because it was coming from her heart. But in that moment, after she apologized to me, my dad would look at me and say, now, what do you say to your sister? Apologize. I say, forgive her. I forgive you. But I didn't really have time to process that. And I didn't know how to process that as a young boy. But we carried that behavior into our adulthood. How many times does a friend say, I'm sorry to you, and our first reaction is to accept their apology? We don't have to do that anymore. What we can do is acknowledge them and thank them. We could say, thank you so much for apologizing to me. It means so much to me. Now, you didn't hear me say, I accept your apology. I acknowledge what they said to me. And then I take time when I'm not with them in that moment to really process what that transaction was and to come to terms with it. And then I can always go back to them and I could say, you know, last week or last month, the last time we got together, you apologized to me. And I want to let you know that I accept your apology. I forgive you. Now, here's the catch with that is that when we accept that apology, we do have an expectation from that individual. And that expectation is that they're not going to repeat that assault or that behavior that hurt us the last time. But when we are in a relationship that's toxic or unhealthy or dysfunctional, whatever that relationship is, there's a really good chance that they're going to apologize today and they're going to repeat the offense in the future. And then after a short amount of time, we have broken down our ability to trust them because they're no longer trustworthy. So then what does that apology mean in the first place? It means nothing. Then we have a choice to stay engaged in that relationship, knowing that we're going to continuously be assaulted or be hurt. They're going to apologize. We're going to be in that pattern of cycle. Does any of this sound familiar, guys? Or am I talking to myself here?
No.
How many of us
Spot
have been
on.
there? How many of us have been on the receiving end, but how many of us have been on the giving end? I've been on both sides of that coin, and it sucked.
Yeah.
It was an endless road. It was an endless road to pain.
Mm-hmm.
So how we can navigate through that is we take our time to really process and understand what does forgiveness mean? And do we negotiate a new agreement with that individual? Now, what I mean by that is we set a boundary. I accept your apology. However, this is what I need in the future. In other words, we set a boundary around that. If this happens again, we set a consequence for their behavior. Simple, not easy, because we don't like to have to create boundaries with people. It feels uncomfortable. But if we don't set that boundary with that individual, who's going to protect that little boy or that little girl within us? We're not protecting them when we're not creating a boundary with a consequence. What do you make of that, Fasano?
What I feel is that we all have to keep in mind that we're human. And we can't walk on eggshells in this lifetime, always watching what we say, what we do. We're mindful, we're conscious, we're aware, but we're still going to say things. As in this wonderful book I'm reading, we're all going to keep on screwing up because we're human. But we all have to realize that we might say something. I might say something on this show that might offend 3 or 4 people out there. I don't know. But we've got to be mindful that we're still in the process of being human and learning and growing, moving to a greater levels of mindfulness and consciousness and awareness, and living our lives from that place, but always knowing that we have to let ourselves off the hook. If we say something and somebody comes back and gets all pissed off and angry, that's how they've perceived it. And then if 2 mindful people can get together and talk about it, and then it comes to an understanding. But we really need to be mindful that we're human, and we're just moving along on this pathway of self-mastery, getting better and better at being human, being who we are, moving into our heart space, being more mindful, being more conscious, taking situations that maybe we said something or did something to someone else, and they came to us and told us about it in a mindful, caring way, as opposed to attacking, judging, and shaming us for it based upon what Jay just said. I didn't know what I didn't know at that point in my life. I didn't know what I didn't know a month ago. And really coming to that place, and I guess what I'm getting at is self-forgiveness, self-compassion, of allowing ourselves to be on this pathway in life and knowing that we don't have to walk on eggshells. We're being as mindful as we can. We're being as compassionate and aware and conscious as we can as we learn and grow every single day. That's a way, in some maybe roundabout way, that forgiveness begins with me.
Beautiful.
And,
Beautiful.
and Jeff, you, I don't know if you want to share a little bit about, obviously what we were discussing, within the green room for the week, because it sounded pretty emotional on your side. Here's a big question for you, my brother. Would you be able to forgive that person, or on the other side, ask for that person's forgiveness?
Like I said, it's not about asking for their forgiveness or me forgiving them. It's about exactly what Jay said earlier before I asked that question. Am I mindful enough of being made aware of something that happened a whole bunch of years ago? First thing is, if something like that happens and we're jolted and triggered by it, we have to honor that first. We have to have our feelings about it, and whatever feelings come up about it, and be with all of that. But then it's about coming from that place and then going, okay, as that happens and we process what's happening and we move through it, then looking at it from a different place of what did I learn, what did I grow, and like Jay said, once again, I didn't know what I didn't know. And coming from that place, but that's why I asked the question. If we are growing on this pathway, becoming more mindful, conscious, and aware of where we were a month ago, a year ago, 5 years ago, if where we are right now, and hear something like that, going, wow, okay, that what is mine to do? What is mine to do where I am right now? What is mine? What is my responsibility in it? And what is the other person's responsibility in it as well? I'm going to go back to what Jay said about 15 minutes ago of how he looked at it and all that stuff. That's where we are right now. If somebody came to me and wanted to talk about something that I said a year ago, 5 minutes ago, I'm open to it. I'm totally open to it. If you want to discuss it on an adult level, what Jay said earlier about what it could be triggering is a wound from a little boy or a little girl by mom and dad 35 years ago that was triggered, that you're going to transfer onto somebody that might have said something and said it, but it triggered your stuff in that moment, that little girl, that little boy. And then all of a sudden that is triggered. Then you remember 5 different people that triggered that along the way, and you want to go and you want to say something to them. So, I mean, this is a big subject, and that's really important to look at. It's all about where we are within it and how we could be with it in each and every moment. And then even if we do react in the moment, we can still look at that and move on from that. It's about what is my responsibility, and is the other person taking responsibility for where they are in that moment, or even in the moment now where they are. That's why I asked the question.
Yeah.
Are we here to expect others to be where we are?
Thank you, Jeff. Josh, I'm going to put you in a hot seat since we're going to play. This is a game of ping pong here. We're rallying in this moment. We're going to volley back and forth. So, Josh, I want to ask you,
Mhm.
is there anyone in your life that you're still holding on to hurt and pain around that you have not been able to walk through the process of forgiveness? And if so, that you have an awareness around, are you willing to share with us what's holding you back from the true essence of what forgiveness should feel like for Josh Richer?
Good questions.
Thank you.
There's not anybody that I haven't consciously moved through. You know what happens though? I'll be honest.
Thank you.
It's
We are real
Talk
men.
live.
Got to be live. You got to be real.
To this day, 7 years after that, my financial crash, I still struggle with my financing things. I just got rejected for a car loan recently because I need a new car, and I am tempted to pick up that old anger from that guy, and I feel these temptations because there's still a face, there's still a name, and but I also realize in that, and I talk myself through that moment, and I say, is this worth my energy? Is this worth my time? Can I fix the past? Can I invent a time machine and go back? All the answers are no. So clearly it is a waste of my energy to hold on to that anger. And just like you beautifully said earlier too, Jay, I don't want anger in my life anymore. I had enough of that. And I'm tired of that. I held it for a very long time. And so, am I tempted? Sure. I'm human. It really sucks as in my mid 40s to get turned down for simple financial stuff. And it makes me feel less than everybody else still. And so I battle with that.
Thank you for sharing that truth, Josh. I do want to say to you what came through in that spontaneous share that you just did for me was I went right to, and this is a choice how I embrace in my own life today, is that when something that I think I am ready for, or something that I desire, or something that I want, I get turned down for, or I get blocked from, or it doesn't happen the way I want it to in that moment, I I I I lean into trust. And what I trust is that in that moment, I'm not ready for that new car. And that's why I got denied. Not because the bank doesn't think I'm ready for the new car, but because I embrace spirituality in my life. I embrace that the universe is there to show me that the universe has a greater plan for me that I can't see in that moment. So for me, in that moment, it's very easy for me to slip back into that rabbit hole that you just described, that you work through. But I do know this is that if I give myself permission in that moment to do that, Josh, I'm gonna find myself being that victim one more time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that will never serve me. Like we talked about with Rachel last week. You know, we either could be a victim or we could be a warrior, a victim or we could be a victor. And here's where it is for me, at least, trusting that when I get denied something that, I think I'm ready for, I worked for it, I deserve it, and I get denied, I go, okay, I guess I'm supposed to be doing something else in this moment. And then embracing that. That's one of the tools that I have learned how to really lean into in my own healing journey that started back in 2015. And I tell you what, it's a whole lot nicer to have that inner dialogue than the inner dialogue that I just described a moment ago of feeling like, why can't I have that? I deserve that. Does that resonate with you? Does that make sense?
Oh, perfectly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
All right, Ev, you're in a hot
No,
seat. Go ahead, Josh. What were you going to say? Josh, go ahead.
I was just going to say it is that surrender, and it is that trust that, timing is everything. And the time isn't now.
There you go.
So
it's just, there's freedom in that, Josh. There is so much freedom. Believe me, I know. I know. I get reminded of practicing that new way of showing up for myself all the time. And there is freedom in that. Ev, I'm going to put you on a hot seat. Is there anyone in your life, same question that I hit Josh with, that you're holding on to some old pain, hurt, resentment towards a parent, a sibling, a girlfriend, a friend, a business associate, that you've held on to, and what do you think may be resistance or holding the block from the true essence of forgiveness?
Absolutely no one, no thing, or nobody, brother.
How's that possible?
It's where I am on my awareness journey, my friend. I don't hold on to any grudges, any grief, any resentment. It takes too much energy, and that's what I'm trying to share here. This power of forgiveness is your emotional, mental wellness. And it really does come back to what we're able to let go from the past. See, when we're holding on to this stuff, we're not here in the present. How can we start creating a future for ourselves when we're holding on to something, asking for someone's forgiveness? I've given people forgiveness over these last few years. But that's because I'm in this part of my process and my journey where I've reached a level of awareness that I don't no longer need that particular energy of that attachment. So it really is an energy game, brothers and sisters. And so for me, a big part of this, we've talked about it here tonight, that it is maybe an attitude. It's definitely not an act. But I said this quote going back 2 or 3 years now. Forgiveness is not an act of service, but more so a practice to serve us. Let me say that again. Forgiveness is not an act of service, but more so a practice to serve us. So we allow our own personal freedom and liberation. But while we still hold on to particular things within our lives, like I said, we do not allow ourselves to create the reality we want to see here in the now or for our future selves. I'll leave it on that note, brother.
beautiful.
Simple, not easy, right, Ev?
It's a journey, brother. It's a journey.
You know, it just popped up for me when Ev was saying that, which is fantastic, because I want to be Ev when I grow up.
There you
go. Because I know that I'm not there. Full disclosure. I'm getting there, but I'm definitely not there. But what popped up for me right then and there is exactly what Ev said at the end. There are people in my life that that whatever said something, did something that hurt me. But as Jay said earlier, I'm not. I was who I was when there's 3 people that stay with me that said or did something that hurt me in a certain way. And all 3 were a long time ago, and it stays with me. It's not about them, but the hurt stays with me. That stays with me. The feelings stay with me. But I have learned, and one of my biggest challenges over the years has been to stand up for myself, have that voice. I was always the person that I always wanted to be loved. So if somebody said something in the moment, I would roll over, go within, and say, no, don't speak your truth, don't respond to that, because that's not your place. So in these instances, that's exactly what happened. I wanted to say something, or even didn't have a chance to say something, so I internalized it and held on to it. So really what it's about is those three people probably have no clue any longer that they said something to me or did something to me that hurt me and brought up these feelings. So now what I have to do is exactly what Ev said, to free myself of this, is to have compassion for that person who didn't know what he didn't know at that time, as Jay would say. I didn't know how to express myself in a certain way. I didn't know how to do that. So what I'm in the process of doing is beginning to have compassion for that person who didn't know how to do that. And in that practice and that process will let me off the hook and the other person off the hook, because I just didn't know. I didn't know how to express myself. I didn't know how to say to somebody in a caring, mindful way of, you know what you just said really triggered something inside of me, hurt me. I didn't know how to do that. I did not know how to do that those years ago, but now I do, in a very loving and mindful way.
Beautiful. Jeff, thank you for telling on yourself and sharing your truth today. I want to take a moment here to honor you for that. Thank you.
Okay.
I want to switch gears here. I know we're coming up on the hour. We got about 4 minutes here, but where I want to take this is, and this probably, I'm going to open up a can of worms. This could be an hour, but we're talking about forgiving others, and we've been talking about deep diving into how to forgive ourselves. But there's different levels of pain. There's different levels of hurt. And for those that have received pain at a much more profound level than many have experienced. So, for example, if you grew up in a home where there was significant abuse, emotional, mental, physical, and even sexual abuse, does it make it more difficult for us as that wounded adult child to forgive perhaps a parent or a sibling or an aunt or an uncle that caused that level of pain within us that we are now living with as an adult in let's say PTSD and or trauma? Who wants to take a stab at this one?
Again, brother, it depends where you're on your self-awareness journey. On a soul level, we all signed up for these lessons. We all signed up for these experiences. No matter how abusive they may have been, no matter how traumatizing they may have been, I've been through them all. But I forgave that energy back to that particular personal thing. So when we come to that understanding, understanding, and overstanding, that is only us that has the power for this forgiveness, this practice, this art, this gift, then we allow this power to come back to us. And no one, nothing will hold us back from being able to be the person that we want to see, brothers and sisters. So as hard as some of those things that Jay's mentioned within our lives may have happened to us, take the gift. It's a unique story to you.
I got chills right now, Ev, because I feel that pain for men and women. I coach some of those individuals that are facing their shadows, their deepest shadows in this moment. And I too had to step through my own pain. And, you know, we tend to, as humans, want to kind of keep a scorecard or compare. There is no comparison. There never is. But if you are an adult and you're watching and you're listening and you're still holding on as a man and as a woman to your childhood wounds and traumas, you're still entangled. You're still in it with them. And you do not have your power back. And the only way to take your power back that I am aware of is through the process of forgiveness. And as Tiffany reminded me, forgiveness is not for the other person. It's for us, so that we can free our soul, our heart, our body, and our mind from that pain, the pain of inner bondage, so that we could finally experience what freedom can feel like. I pray that you have the courage to step in to your own life, to free yourself from your past and understand that whatever you experienced wasn't because you weren't worthy. It wasn't because you didn't deserve anything more than that. It was because you were exposed to an individual who was such a wounded soul that they didn't know any other way to show up. And there's where the healing can begin. When we can willing to experience empathy for that individual and free yourself from the enmeshment and entanglement that may have happened decades ago. And with that, I love you guys. Viewers, thank you so much for joining us this evening on this topic around forgiveness. We'll catch you next week on Real Men, Real Talk Live. I love you. Peace and blessings.